chapter, verses 38 through to 42, which describe, this chapter describes Krishna's childhood pastimes and Krishna and his family and Balaram moving from Gokul to Vrindavan. I'm going to share my screen so we can find my share screen. Here we go. Okay, can you all see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, so what I will do is I will recite verse 42 and then I will go back and do the translations for all of them. So this is 10th canto, 11th chapter, verse 42. Tam vatsa rupinam vikshya vatsa yuthagatam hari darshayan baladevaya sanirmugdeva shadat. Translation: when the Supreme Personality of Godhead saw that the demon had assumed the form of a calf and entered among the group of other calves, he pointed out to Baladev, "Here is another demon." Then he very slowly approached the demon as if he did not understand the demon's intentions. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. The import of the words Mugdha Iva is that although Krishna knows everything, here he pretended that he did not understand why the demon had entered among the calves, and he informed Baladev by a sign. I'm going to go back to verse 38 and read all the translations through. So verse 38, not far away from their residential quarters, both Krishna and Balaram, equipped with all kinds of playthings, played with other cowherd boys and began to tend the small calves. Verses 39 to 40. Sometimes Krishna and Balaram would play on their flutes. Sometimes they would throw ropes and stones devised for getting fruits from the trees. Sometimes they would throw only stones, and sometimes, their ankle bells tinkling, they would play football with fruits like bel and amalaki. Sometimes they would cover themselves with blankets and imitate cows and bulls and fight with one another, roaring loudly. And sometimes they would imitate the voices of animals. In this way, they enjoyed sporting, exactly like two ordinary human children. Vrindavan is full of peacocks. Kujat kokila hansa sarasha, gana kirne mayurakule. The Vrindavan forest is always full of cuckoos, ducks, swans, peacocks, cranes, and also monkeys, bulls, and cows. So Krishna and Balaram used to imitate the sounds of these animals and enjoy sporting. Verse 41, one day while Ram and Krishna, along with their playmates, were tending the calves on the bank of the river Yamuna, another demon arrived there, desiring to kill them. Verse 42, when the Supreme Personality of Godhead saw that the demon had assumed the form of a calf and entered amongst the group of other calves, he pointed out to Baladev, "Here is another demon." Then he very slowly approached the demon as if he did not understand the demon's intentions. The import of the word Mugdha Iva is that although Krishna knows everything, here he pretended that he did not understand why the demon had entered among the calves, and he informed Baladev by a sign. If you can at home, please join me in Mangalarchanam, invoking blessings and good wishes and the grace of the many teachers and the Lord and everybody who's come before us and is present now, so we can understand as deeply as possible these sacred words. Om Gyan Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yata Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajata Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sarvadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagna Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpa Turubhischa Kripa Sindhu Bevicha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Just going to stop sharing my screen. So this is actually a very, very wonderful section of the Srimad Bhagavatam. I love the 10th canto, and I'm sure many of you do. They give us a very intimate but multifaceted look into Krishna, into the Lord's pastimes. And why I say multifaceted is because everything that Krishna does has many, many purposes. Even all of our actions, when we do anything, when we say anything, it has an impact on many layers of ourselves. It can affect the body, the mind. It can affect the soul, depending on what we're saying and doing. You know, spiritual activities cover all three. Equally, it will affect that in others. What we say to others, what we do for others, has the potential to not just affect their body and mind, but also their soul. And equally, the impact of our actions and words isn't just immediate. It's not just short term. It's also medium term and long term, because the more repeatedly we do something, the deeper the impact, and the longer term the effect. Also, depending on who we're affecting, there may be a more deep effect depending on their previous sanskaras. So then, to conclude, that actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, who is the source of everything and everything rests in him, it's inevitable then that many, many unlimited purposes are fulfilled just by one action of his. But, you know, through Shastra, through the Srimad Bhagavatam, through the purports of our teachers like Srila Prabhupada, we can get a glimpse into some of his many purposes. We will never have a full understanding of everything that occurs with every single little glance or movement of Krishna's, but we can get some understanding. So diving into these pastimes isn't just an exercise of passive purification. It's not just an exercise in learning about Krishna, but it's an opportunity for us to really understand, as he describes, the transcendental nature of his appearance and activities. Because Krishna explains to us in the Bhagavad Gita, he explains to Arjuna that really to get to know me and to develop love for me, one of the ways you can do this is, he says, one who understands the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities never comes here again. So to the degree we understand the depth of his activities, this is what transcendence means. It transcends, goes beyond just our immediate understanding, the immediate understanding of the five working senses, our intellect, etc. And as we transcend, and our understanding transcends and enters into this transcendental nature of Krishna's activities, which are beyond time and space, not even this universe. So then the attraction inevitably happens. So this particular chapter, it opens with the movement of the residents of Gokul, Krishna's birthplace, Nanda Maharaj, Yashoda Mai, Mother Rohini, Krishna, Balaram, and so many of their friends and their friends' parents. Because, you know, up until now, some demons have really troubled their lives. For example, Trinavarta, Bhutana, Rakatasur, and they're thinking, you know, yes, although Krishna and Balaram were not hurt by any of these incidences. This place has become very dangerous. So let's move. And so they make their way towards Vrindavan. And in this chapter, it time jumps a little after describing the arrival and settlement of Krishna and his family in Vrindavan. It jumps to, it mentions how years have passed, and Krishna and Balaram are now at the age of being able to herd calves and learning about agriculture. And this is the age of around 5 years old, 6 years old, when they move. That's describing now when the Vatasura demon approaches them. Vrindavan is, and particularly Vrindavan seen with transcendental vision, real Vrindavan, which is not affected by our vision, which is affected by the modes of natural nature. We have Vrindavan here on earth, and Vrindavan here on earth is still to our eyes covered by a veil. If we're not, if our eyes are not tinged with affection, we don't see the dimension of pure spiritual Vrindavan. But if we actually can see Vrindavan is actually a very magical place. The spiritual dimension is free of the suffering that the modes bring. One may think that, when we think of summertime, we think of wonderful sunshine and beautiful heat. We can't wait. But often when summertime comes, because of the nature of this world, there's some austerity with summertime. It can get too hot, right? One can get thirsty. One may not be able to sleep properly in the heat of the summer. Maybe your houses, I know in the UK, we ache, we hanker for a good summer. And, this year was unusual. We had 3 months of a really good summer. Normally we get maybe a couple of weeks. We had 3 months, but it was also an austerity because our homes here are not designed for summertime. But in Vrindavan, summertime is like spring. This is what the 10th canto describes as summertime is like spring. Why? Springtime, there's equal balance of warmth and coolness. Anything that may cause problems in the summertime, it will be disturbing. There is something in Vrindavan that counteracts it. So, normally in summertime, you'll hear so many loud crickets or insects that may not have the most pleasant noises. But in Vrindavan, the waterfalls, the beautiful sound of the waterfalls drowns out the noise of the crickets. The trees are not dehydrated in summertime like they may be here. But in Vrindavan, that natural spray of water from the waterfalls moistens the trees, gives them the water that they need and quenches their thirst. The winds in Vrindavan during summertime are set at the perfect pace because everything in Vrindavan, everything in the spiritual dimension is cooperative. Everything and everyone cooperates. And so much of our spiritual life in practice and in manifestation is about inculcating the spirit of cooperation. So the wind is working to the perfect level of the summertime to cool the air just that much. Isn't it so wonderful when it's too hot and you feel a cooling breeze? It's extremely satisfying. The grass is not dehydrated and brown, it's fresh and green and moist, and it never burns. The flowers are fully in blossom, and the air is filled with the sounds of many, many animals. And as we're hearing here, the boys would be so happy. Their work or their training was full of play. Sometimes they would imitate the sounds of other animals. Sometimes they would use sticks that describes to bring down fruits from the trees. Sometimes the trees would bow out of service and want to offer their fruits to Krishna and Balaram. Again, in this mood of cooperation and service. There's no envy. The trees don't envy each other. Or why are you offering your fruit better than mine? Why are they eating your fruit? No, there's love and compassion and cooperation. And the boys would dance. They would wrestle. They would sing. They would do so many things. Sometimes they'd blindfold each other. So like this, the boys are playing. They have the calves around them. They would make play out of their world, out of their work. They would make play. Even us here, aren't we always looking for some sort of work which is enjoyable? Right, that there's some happiness, some satisfaction. So for Krishna, he's always happy, even in his work. He's tending the calves, Balaram's tending the calves. Balaram has his plow, he's focusing on agriculture, he's training up in agriculture. Krishna's training in cow care. And they have their cowherd boyfriend. So they're having a really, really wonderful time. And whilst they're playing, now Remember, if you do your work of cow care well, any of you who serve in the Goshala, you know your cows very individually. You not just recognize them by their appearance, but also their nature. So Krishna is a very personal cowhead boy. He knows every single one of his calves. Balaram is also very personal. They're both very personal. This is what is so attractive, one of the attractive things about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and standout features, that he's extremely personal and he's individual and unique with each and every one of us based on our needs, including his calves. So he knows all of them. He recognizes all of them, remembers all of them, and understands all of their nature. So when Vatasura comes disguised as a calf, it's no surprise then that Krishna really recognizes, this calf seems different to all the others. I have not seen him before. And of course, Krishna, being all-knowing, even as a little boy, understands that this calf must be a demon. He even knows who sent this demon. And he indicates to Balaram, he says, okay, this calf, I know you've noticed, this calf is not from our usual herd. He's unusual and he's a demon. But I wonder why he's here. Krishna, sometimes to enhance his activities and the joy and the experience of the interaction, he will cover his understanding. He will cover his understanding. We also do this ourselves to enhance our relationships, to make things more exciting. So Krishna does this, and he indicates that he doesn't know really why this calf is here. But there's also the element of surprise. He wants to surprise Vatsasura, because if Krishna immediately makes it obvious that this is a demon, and I know why you're here, and you've come here to hurt us, of course, that calf will get startled. Vatsasura will become also aware, oh, Krishna's seen me, Krishna knows who I am, and he will make a run for it. So in this way, Krishna's done, many things. He's enhanced his activities. He's teaching us a lesson, and we'll come to that lesson in a moment. But he's also making sure that the calf isn't alarmed and the demon doesn't run away. He's also making sure that the cowhead boys aren't alarmed. He doesn't want to scare them. And so approaches the calf very gently, as if he fully accepts him. And before Vatsasura knows what's happening, Krishna picks him up, and in his inimitable way, he destroys him. He hurts him and he destroys him. Understanding that, yes, although he's in a calf's body, this is actually not a calf. Things are not always what they seem. It's one of the first lessons from this particular pastime, that things are not always what they seem. Now, just a little bit of background about Vatsasura. Now, Vatsasura is, in the Garga Samhita, it describes how Vatsasura in his previous birth, and remember, all of us have been through so many appearances and disappearances. We've forgotten all of ours, but as Krishna says, he remembers every single one of his. So these demons who come in Krishna's earthly pastimes, they've also had previous lives. So he was a demon, Pramila. He's the son of Muru. Now, he'd conquered all the demigods in battle. And after doing this, he entered Vashishta Muni's ashram, and he saw Vashishta Muni's beautiful cow, Nandini, and he wanted the cow. So he described himself as a Brahmin. Now, Nandini had special vision. She recognized that this Brahmin was not an ordinary Brahmin, and said to the Brahmin, says, look, I know you're a demon in disguise, and this is an offense. So in your next birth, you will have to appear as a calf. So Pramila, Vatsasura, Pramila then begged Vashishta Muni for mercy. He says, look, I know I have defeated you in battle, and I am sorry that I have come to and made this offense of disguising myself to obtain your cow and beg for your cow. And so Vashishta said that after taking his birth as a calf, he would be liberated by Krishna. So this mood of understanding the many aspects and the many personalities of Krishna's pastimes gives us insight on many levels. So Vatsasura is, yes, on the surface there to fulfill Kansa's desire to destroy Krishna, but he's also fulfilling his own journey of actually he needs to pay the repercussions of offending a Vaishnav, offending a cow, but also receive the blessing of being destroyed at Krishna's hands, because Krishna's touch, whether his touch appears to be destruction or a blessing, actually is always ultimately a blessing. Coming back to this point that, Krishna fulfills many purposes through one action. He explains a little bit of this in the Bhagavad Gita. For example, he explains to Arjuna that the reason for his appearance is to reestablish religious principles, to annihilate demons, and to please the devotees. And from Srila Prabhupada's books, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's books, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur's writings, we can understand that these demons also hold great importance for us in terms of their relationship with Krishna, why Krishna destroys them, but also what they represent. We understand from them that each of these demons represents something that we need to remove or work on in becoming closer to Krishna. There's something that they represent, something that is blocking us from lifting that veil, from moving that veil and crossing a threshold and living in the spiritual dimension, even whilst we're here. Because the spiritual dimension is actually all around us and it's within us. Because the spiritual dimension in Krishna is all pervading and all permeating. There's no actual geographical distinction between the spiritual world and the material world. It's right there within us and around us. But what there is a veil, something separating us. And each of these things in this veil, they have, they're almost like the different threads that weave together to make the veil. So the veil in one sense is very thin, it's subtle, but subtle things can be very powerful. And so this is just, Vatasura represents one thread in this veil that stops us from really crossing this threshold and entering the spiritual dimension. And this thread, Vatasura, is described as representing this unwanted obstacle that we have of a childish greediness that we have for materialistic sense gratification. Now, why is it described as a childish greediness for materialistic sense gratification that arises from bad association? Why is it described as this? Now, one thing about the demons of Vrindavan is you'll notice, if any of you have ever studied this, is as you look at the demons of Vrindavan in chronological order, the earlier demons describe the almost more obvious blocks, the ones that are there very early in our devotional life. They're almost, they're very gross. It's like the gross dirt. When you're tidying and cleaning your room, there are some things that are very obvious that they need cleaning. You can see the dust, okay? And it's very easy for us to sit here and say, yeah, actually, the materialistic desires and attachments, yes, everybody has these. And they're very, very apparent when we first take to spiritual life. It doesn't take a lot of humility for us to recognize that we have this. But as the demons progress, the unwanted things become more and more subtle. They're things which are deep-rooted, things which are harder for us to recognize and harder for us to accept. So we're dealing here with Vatasura, who's there in the early pastimes of Krishna, with this, representing this anartha or unwanted thing of childish greediness or materialism from bad association. Bad association. Now, it's interesting because we are pleasure-seeking beings. We are by nature pleasure-seeking, both in our spiritual self, and that comes through. Everything of our spiritual self comes through in our human nature as well. And as human beings, we're pleasure-seeking. There isn't a single person who isn't looking to seek pleasure from their activities and interactions. We don't purposefully set out to make ourselves miserable. We don't purposefully set out to make ourselves miserable. So this is a reflection of our divine nature, that we are pleasure-seeking beings. And naturally, many of us will take to spiritual life because it's bringing us some pleasure, And it may be very easy in the early stages of spiritual life to move away from those activities that just create material pleasure, but may not create spiritual pleasure or spiritual advancement. But what can happen is, as we stay on that road, on that path, and continue to practice, these attachments or attractions may reemerge. They may reemerge. And one of the reasons they reemerge is because in our initial stages of Krishna consciousness, we have this raw enthusiasm, utsaha. Now there's raw or immature utsaha, enthusiasm, and there's also mature enthusiasm. Now, enthusiasm is not just a feeling, an emotion, and an experience, but enthusiasm is also in many ways a mindset and a motivator. And enthusiasm motivates us to do things. So whilst our enthusiasm in the early stages is raw, it's very determined by how we feel, right? We often, our early experiences of enthusiasm, I feel good, so I'm enthusiastic. But spiritual life doesn't always feel good, especially if we haven't yet started to experience joy from spiritual practices. Or the joy of spiritual practices has somehow waned, because Krishna has now brought us to a point where he's saying, look, I want you to look at your stuff. I know I took your problems away for a little while you connected with me, but you do need to look at these, because these were things that you were carrying, and I only held on to them temporarily. You now need to decide for yourself whether you want to continue carrying these things or let them go. So at this stage, our material desires can manifest again. Those things we took shelter of, past patterns, can manifest again. If we look at it in terms of addictions as an analogy, in dealing with an addiction, it's not enough to just remove the addictive substance. One has to also lose a taste for the addictive substance, but also whatever that addictive substance was fulfilling in their life has to be replaced by something better. Okay, so sometimes what can happen is, if we haven't got to the stage where whatever we were seeking, whatever solace we were seeking from our attachments to the material world, if they haven't yet fully been satisfied by our spiritual activities, we haven't developed that higher taste, then it's our mind automatically, because remember, anarthas reside in the mind and the ego, but nothing to do with our spiritual self. So these anarthas, or those things, those patterns that our mind previously took shelter of, we may find our mind and our senses wanting to take shelter of them again. But one thing that's very clear here is that Vatasura describes or represents this childish greediness or attachment for material things that comes from bad association. So this is really important and really powerful, because bad association, what is bad or what is good association? Association is association. Association is when we mix with people we trust. We're not just keeping their company, we trust them. Trust means I will accept your opinion as fact. Okay, but when we trust someone, we don't Google everything they say. We accept what they say. We accept what they say about themselves. We accept what they say about us when we trust them. And we accept what they say about the world. So when we are in an environment where we trust people and their association uplifts our consciousness, we call this good association. But when their association drives us to change our actions and desires to keep us away from our spiritual progress, then we just call this bad association, because ultimately we're trying to, as spiritualists, connect with and cooperate with and develop loving relationships with those who are going to uplift our spiritual life. And this association is really powerful, because with the moment we trust someone, something, or a source of information, mindset, guidance, immediately the first thing that starts to happen as we are exposed to these different ideas and this information, so we're exposed and we trust it, we internalize it. And as we internalize it, it has a direct impact on our desires. Direct impact on our desires. All of our desires are born of what we're exposed to. Everything we're exposed to leads to a particular desire. And the more we're exposed to something, the stronger the desire becomes. And of course, we understand in terms of understanding karma that, and even spiritual activity, that all of our contemplation and actions, and then the consequences of those actions, are born of our desires. So this principle of understanding that, this anartha of an increase in material desires or holding on to material desires and the enjoyment that comes from them is really very closely connected to the kind of association we keep, is actually not just for the beginning stages of our devotional life, but is also there in the middle and the advanced stages. That's why association, sadhu sangha, is a permanent feature of our spiritual life, both in this world and in the spiritual dimension, because we are always in the association of others. So I know I only have a couple of minutes left before I need to take your questions. I really just want to just sum up with, when we study, when we read, when we hear Krishna's pastimes, sometimes our approach to reading, especially with the pastimes, might be passive, and that I will read this, and simply by reading it, if I have faith in this, it's going to purify me. And that's good. That's wonderful. Having this mood is wonderful. Sometimes we may find we don't read those pastimes because maybe we've read the same pastime over and over again. And so it's harder for us to have faith in the very potent and passive effect of simply hearing Krishna's pastimes. So in closing, what I'd like to invite and encourage all of us to do is that to not lose the habit, or to regain the habit of regularly delving into Krishna's pastimes, not just passively, not just until the point that they're entertaining, but really deconstructing them, scrutinizing them, trying to understand, what does this mean for me in my spiritual life? How is Krishna establishing religious principles through this? How is him annihilating a demon? How can I understand this? And how can this strengthen my faith in him? Because really only Krishna can destroy these different attachments, just like he has done with this calf. He snuck up on the calf. He snuck up on Vatasura and destroyed him. This is how powerful Krishna consciousness is, that the process works so strongly. These material desires we have, Krishna sneaks up on them. He removes them. He's so beautiful. The process is so powerful simply by calling his name. Even if we don't know we have a particular anartha, but by calling his name inadvertently, in many ways, just happens just by the power of his name. We lose interest in material life. But on the other side also, he says he wants to please his devotees through these activities. And if we find ourselves reading and not finding pleasure, one of the easiest ways to feel delighted by something or someone is to have gratitude. So if we can find somewhere when we're reading his pastimes, what can I feel grateful for? What have I had something revealed to me by reading this that I can feel grateful for? Has something jumped out at me that I can feel grateful for? And in this way, we can read with an active attitude, not just passively waiting for the process to purify us, not just passively waiting for the pastime to purify us, but really absorbing our hearts and minds in the pastime in such a way that we are actively engaging with Krishna's many purposes when he engages in any pastime. So I'm going to stop there. It would be really nice if devotees had their cameras on. It helps me to also be more present. Thank you so much. Any questions or comments or realizations?
Thank you very much, Citi-Śakti. Great class. Okay, temple room, you have the priority. You have the priority. Evan G is getting up. Adipusha Prabhu. Evan, okay. We can't hear you, temple room. We cannot hear you. We see that you're not muted, but for some reason we can't hear you. Maybe while you're setting things up, I'll ask my question, Citi-Śakti. So you said that Krishna comes to annihilate and chastise and destroy the demons.
Mm-hmm.
How come, I mean, there are so many demons out there today. How come they're still alive and well? Who's going to take care of them? Is that up to us to, destroy them? And also, how to see a demon? Who's that demon? Is that is that my boss, or is that me, or is that a devotee in my community? How do I know who's a demon?
Yeah, that's a really powerful question and a really important and good question. So when you look at Krishna's pastimes, the demons usually have some unusual features. I mean, Vatasura is different. He's a cute little calf. Most of them are not cute little calves. Most of them are kind of scary. And when you think of a demon or an asura, you're thinking something which is visibly, you look at a demon and you can tell this is a demon, right? But actually, if you look at this word demon and what demonic means, demon is not just a form, it's a way of thinking. It's often likened to, especially if you're using Christian terminology, demonic, sin, they kind of go hand in hand. But if you look at both things, what it all actually just at a baseline means, it's not about right or wrong. It's actually those activities and those mindsets that keep us away from divinity. That's actually what demonic is that which keeps it. Because if you look at all the demons, what's their purpose? Is to destroy divinity. That's why Kansa is sending them. Destroy our source, destroy the heart of us, go destroy Krishna, go destroy the source of love. That is very demonic mentality. It doesn't matter whether it's a cute calf or a three-headed demon who's frightening to look at. So this mentality, especially in the time and age we're living in, if we look around, there's no three-headed monsters. Okay, there's no Trinavat, as a whirlwind. We don't see this. But what Srimad Bhagavatam does explain to us is that in previous ages, demons and divinity lived on different planets. Okay, the demonic and the divine, those whose mindset was to stay away from God and those whose heart set was to be with God, were lived on different planets. Then as time progressed, we get to from Satyug to Treta Yuga, then demons and devotees lived on the same planet, but in different countries. Then as we progress to Dwapara Yuga, which is the time that Krishna appeared, demons and devotees lived in the same countries, but different cities. And then in Kali Yuga, the time we're in now, demons and devotees reside within the same person. So within all of us, we can have a mentality and a heart set where we want to stay away from divinity. And then that feeds those activities that keep us away from Krishna. What one might call sin, but actually sin is not about bad or good. You can do good things, but also with a mood that I want to stay away from Krishna. Even our charity can keep us away from divinity. And charity morally is seen as something that's good. Or we can have a heart set and a mindset which is divine, devotional, and it reconnects us with ourselves and reconnects us with Krishna. So actually, rather than seeking out who else is a demon, okay, who is the demon, is actually as we start to unearth and distinguish this voice within us which tries to keep us away from Krishna, or the voice within us that wants to run towards Krishna into his loving arms. As we do that kind of work better, engage in the process of bhakti more closely and more actively, then even if we recognize in others a demonic mentality or a divine mentality, actually through inspiration and proper action. What does proper action mean? Always engaging in activities and words where we are able to either help somebody who's engaging in a demonic mentality to be uplifted from that and move away from it, or even understanding, where am I at? Am I still at a point where if I'm around a demonic mentality, I'm more likely to run towards it, or am I able to pull someone away from it? And if we are still at a stage where we might be distracted by it, having the good sense that I need to step away. So this topic of divine and demonic needs to go beyond just understanding things on a moral level, because morality is not anything to do with the soul. Human morality is nothing to do with the soul. Our spirit soul, we are not actually governed by morals. And this is partly actually some of the purport to this whole anartha that Vatasura also represents, that one may think about materialist activities and go, well, this is why we have the 4 regulative principles. This is why we're disciplined with following these principles of freedom. But we have to also be careful that actually the 4 principles of freedom are not what get us back to Godhead. They help, they're supporting features, but they're actually nothing to do with the soul. The soul is actually not interested in celibacy or sex. It's a completely different dimension. We actually are from a different dimension, and we are made of that different dimension. But we live within this world in such a way that it makes it easier for us to lift that veil and to step in, cross over that threshold and step in and own who we actually are. So does that help a little bit distinguish between the divine and demonic?
It's far beyond what I asked. That's so nice. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry.
No, it's good. Okay, Temple Woman, you ready? Okay.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, wonderful description about how pleasant, all the different pleasant features of the Vrindavan forest. The fragrance of the flowers and the cool breeze and everything's so pleasant. How the creation is stepping up to cooperate. All the different features are cooperating for Krishna's pleasure. And I remember hearing about Bible class years ago. The teacher was saying, the Garden of Eden, how wonderful it was. But the most important feature and the most pleasing thing was not necessarily the weather or the flowers, but the fact that they were there in the presence of the Lord. He walked with them in the evening. So the most, special and wonderful thing is that they were there with Krishna, trying to please Krishna.
Amazing.
And you made a very profound statement about, gosh, Krishna's right here. And what keeps us from perceiving the goodness and the love that Krishna has for us? What is it how come I don't see him at this moment, and I don't appreciate and feel inspired to reciprocate with how he's caring for us? What is it that stops me from seeing Krishna?
Thank you. I don't hear a question there, but thank you for your reflection. It's
You
really
don't know
nice.
what keeps us from seeing Krishna? That's the question.
Oh, that's the question. What keeps us from seeing Krishna? Okay. So, that's a big question. And there's so many answers to that. There are many things that keep us from seeing Krishna. But if we distill it down to the base essence, is everything and anything that we give more importance to than Krishna stops us from seeing him, because we still have this illusion that thing has more strength than Krishna, and not enough understanding or experience that Krishna is ultimately stronger. This can be anything. So it could be the pleasures of this world, right? So this is why I was saying this is one of the earlier anarthas, because it's kind of obvious to see that the pleasures of this world could be a distraction. Okay. But less obvious might be how something like guilt or our mistakes can keep us from crossing over the threshold. So mistakes don't stop us from progressing in Krishna consciousness. Krishna says this himself. Even the most abominable thing done really by a devotee can be discounted, because on the path of devotion, it doesn't really matter. All is forgiven. Just carry on. But we beat ourselves up because we think, okay, my mistakes are more powerful than Krishna's love. My mistakes are more powerful than Krishna's love. There's something I see repeatedly, and it's a challenge I see repeatedly for devotees who have especially stayed for a long time on the path, is we really struggle to have self-compassion. We really struggle to forgive ourselves for the mistakes made by the body, the mind, and the false ego. It is the nature of the body and the mind and false ego to make mistakes. For us to expect perfection in the body, mind, and false ego is illusion. It's like expecting water to be dry. The mind, body, and false ego will never be perfect, so they'll never execute anything perfectly. And guilt, in one sense, has a blessing aspect that Krishna is allowing us to be able to reflect, because those people who never feel guilty means, you're blocking some kind of introspection. But if we then allow that guilt to fester and become toxic, where it stops us from engaging with the same processes that are going to lift the veil, like our chanting, our hearing, our service, and particularly associating with devotees. Often we stop associating with devotees when we feel guilty, because we feel we're not going to be accepted. That is us basically saying, and this may sound harsh, we're saying, my mistake is more powerful than Krishna's love. My mistake is more powerful than Krishna's name. My mistake is more powerful than Krishna's desire to be with me. So do you see how what are the things that keep us away from Krishna? It's anything and everything that we give priority to. And there is a difference between addressing an issue and giving it priority. When we address something, we stay with it long enough to deal with it. When it starts to become our object of worship, then we'll notice that our other activities that actually should be connecting us to Krishna, they start to fall away. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It reminds me, one time we came up in the Catholic tradition and they have this procedure called confession, where
Yes.
you go and you tell the priest, I did this and I'm sorry. And then he gives you a penance. Maybe he tells you to say so many prayers, or do it, give a donation in charity or something. And one time I made a confession and the priest said, for your penance, I want you to meditate on how loving and forgiving and wonderful is the Lord.
Wow.
I was like, wow, that's an interesting kind of penance, you know, to think that he's really.
What did you do? What was your sin?
Well, that's not so important. Terrible, horrible. But the important part of the thing is how wonderful is Krishna.
Yeah.
And that, like you said, that are, you know, a certain amount of feeling your conscience and understanding that was not good is one thing. But then if it gets to the point where it's an impediment, where you become discouraged, where you decrease your awareness of how wonderful is Krishna.
Yeah.
And you give up your service, so you feel hopeless and, you know, lose your enthusiasm to serve the Lord. So a certain amount of guilt that is an impetus to dedicate herself in devotional service is good, but it can go the other way if you're overloaded. Thank you so much for your answer. Wonderful class.
Thank you, Prabhu.
We love you.
Thank you. Thank you for your blessings. I appreciate them. Thank you so much. I was actually thinking it's Krishna's mercy and forgiveness to the demons that he destroys them, right? Because actually all of them, they go to Krishna after they're destroyed by him. So that's him forgiving them. It's like a quick, okay, let's just drop everything else now. Whatever you've done, come to me. You know, time to come back to me. So yeah, beautiful. I think that's so wonderful that the priest gave you that penance, because and it's really nice to hear about other traditions, because, you know, if we've not come from other traditions, we may have quite a superficial understanding of them in terms of how confession may work. But that's a very deep way to look at the whole process of confession, rather than looking at it as just, oh, sin negated by piety, but actually, okay, I've done something, which let me see how I can use this to deepen my appreciation for Krishna. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Thank you, Citi-Śakti, Adipusha, Prabhu. Angelika, unmute yourself and maybe even put your camera on.
Yes,
Hare
that would be
Krishna.
wonderful. Hare Krishna.
Sorry, I will not put the camera on just because I don't feel comfortable in the space that doesn't belong to me.
Okay.
I don't know if the owner would mind it or not. I'll just keep it off. But I was reminded of something that deeply touched me, and I also come from a Catholic tradition, and at the beginning of each Mass, there is a time when we say a prayer, which essentially translates to, "I have sinned, dear dear sisters and brothers, and I'm standing here before you because I know that I want to receive purification. Please accept me and please support me in changing this behavior, which I'm not proud about." And yeah, it's just such a beautiful way of already beginning a collective prayer, just standing before others and actually meaning, if we mean that we say that, when we say that, that can be such a powerful practice. So I just wanted to add that there, because yeah, it's just such a potency.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Yeah. And we have to trust the people around us to be able to do that, right? To be able to openly stand up and admit our mistakes, accept our mistake, but trust that others are going to forgive us and not be an obstacle for our progress, but actually push us forward. It's really, really, really powerful. Again, comes back down to relationships. Spiritual life is all about relationships. That's what it is. It begins and ends with a relationship, our relationship with Krishna and with each other.
Thank you very much. Any other reflections? I know devotees are sending messages in the chat saying how wonderful the class is. So thank you very much, Citi-Śakti. You're just on another level. We encourage everyone to rewatch this class and unpack it. Rewatch this class. And who's that?
One question.
Evanji.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for giving such a nice class.
Hare Krishna.
My question, referring back to what you said earlier about association and how the demons actually within like the same person in this Kali Yuga age. And it reminds me, I heard one thing of how the mind is a non-devotee, and Prabhupada said we don't associate with non-devotees. So my question is, how do we associate with the heart? How do we access the heart? And how do we, in that way, not associate with the mind by connecting with the heart? What does it mean to connect with the heart and express that in our service and japa and things like that?
Actually, Prabhupada elaborates on our relationship with the mind. Yes, he says we don't associate with the mind, but what is he talking about here? We don't associate with the mind in the conditioned sense. We always have the company of the mind 24/7. You can't get rid of the mind. But the mind can, just like anybody, you can make the mind a devotee. The mind can be purified, become devotional, because by nature, the mind is actually mode of goodness. So we have this understanding that, this whole demoniac and divinity, ultimately divinity, the root source of and seating place is ourself, right? We are by nature divine. The thoughts and mindset and heart set that keeps us away from Krishna, they are in the mind when the mind is not our friend. And so we're trying to make the mind a devotee, make the mind our friend, so that we can associate, so as in trust and take the opinion as fact. How do we do this? We saturate the intelligence with spiritual knowledge. We saturate the intelligence with Krishna's story, with Radharani's story, through the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita. And as we do this, the mind starts to lose its trust in the material world and trust Krishna more. And when we're talking about the mind and the heart, we forget the mind isn't just about thought. The mind also generates emotions. So when we talk about the heart, the emotional heart is very much related to the mind. So the heart has got different aspects. There's the emotional heart, there's also the physical heart, and there's the spiritual heart. So I hear your question saying, how do we connect with the spiritual heart? It is essential that we make the mind our friend and we turn the mind into a devotee, because we will have to associate with the mind for the greatest part of this life, really. So do we want to keep our mind where it is, or create a mind and transform our mind to be attracted to Krishna and stop trusting this world, stop trusting the false ego, and actually take shelter at everything we know and hear about Krishna, so that the spiritual heart, so we can actually experience Krishna. This is how we go from Shraddha, faith, right through to unconditional love. It goes through stages. But before the mind can, we often have so many techniques of making the mind our best friend, right? Going from being our worst enemy to being our best friend. But for the mind to receive instruction from us, the mind has to first be made a student. The mind has to be willing to accept. The mind has to be willing to accept the instruction that comes from our intelligence, the instruction that comes from higher up. Who's the best student? Think about when we were students. Who did we really hear from? We heard from the teacher who understood us as a student. If we felt think about the teachers you feel deep connection with. You feel deep connection with a teacher and accept from them when they've understood you. So understand the nature of your mind rather than running away from it. Understand the nature of your mind. You understand the nature of your mind, it will become a willing participant in your instructions. And it will become very easy to change it from being your enemy to becoming your friend. Remember, it's becoming your friend, our friend, the real self's friend, not the friend of the world, the real self's friend, which means the mind needs to accept the instructions and knowledge and mood that aligns itself with our divine nature. And if we understand the nature of our mind, whether our mind is one that is saturated with conditioning where we felt rejected and hurt, or whether our mind is saturated with conditioning and experiences that make us feel like we're really someone in this world. For most of us, it's a mixture of both. There's some experiences of rejection and invalidation and some experiences of thinking we're the one, but where did these come from? Do you have a mind which is particularly angry? Do you have a mind which is particularly resentful? Do you have a mind which feels particularly guilty? And we'll just understand with compassion. Okay, I have this kind of mind. Okay, well, what's there? What can I hear from devotees, or how can I take shelter of devotee relationships or reading in such a way that I see this, but I transform it? How can this be transformed to something devotional? How can I increase the faith of my mind in Krishna so that it stops taking shelter of this world and the false ego? So as your mind becomes a willing student, then naturally it will become your friend.
Thank you very much, Citi-Śakti Prabhu. We'll find that devotee and replay your answer to him. He's currently losing his mind, taking darshan of Krishna.
Amazing.
So, thank you very much. Beautiful class. Let's all stay for darshan. They put us on the donation box.
Amazing.
That's where we belong. Okay.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Citi-Śakti. Beautiful class. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the Guru Puja is going. But yeah, once again, thank you very much. Tune back in tomorrow. Don't prioritize your sins. Prioritize Krishna. Krishna is greater than your sins. And repentance in bhakti means how wonderful is Krishna. That's my personal takeaways. So nicely put, Citi-Śakti. Thank you very much. Nice seeing you all. Have a beautiful day. Come back tomorrow. Hare Krishna. Let it be a